tonight, $1.9 trillion.
The Senate has never spent $2 trillion in a more haphazard way.
The COVID relief bill heads from the Senate back to the House as the president waits with pen in hand.
I promised the American people that help was on the way.
And nearly a year after the death of George Floyd, the white police officer caught kneeling on his neck is set to stand trial. Plus,
Pope Francis was not afraid.
The Pope's message of hope to war-torn Iraq in a whirlwind 4-day trek to the land of Abraham. And
this is not a good start.
The former Secretary of State's assessment of the Biden administration so far. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Relaxed restrictions for people who get their vaccines. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. Thanks for joining us. Well, fully vaccinated Americans can now gather with other vaccinated people indoors without wearing masks or social distancing. That new guidance coming from the CDC today.
And that announcement comes as stimulus checks appear to be one step closer for millions of Americans as the House prepares to pass the Senate-approved COVID relief package passed over the weekend. Senior Washington correspondent Tara Mergener is here now. Tara, the House votes is scheduled tomorrow and is expected to pass.
That's right, and it should be a quick vote so that it lands on President Biden's desk later this week. Still, critics say it does little to address COVID and will harm the health of the American economy.
It puts us back on the road to recovery, and it's going to start almost immediately.
The White House celebrating what's expected to be Biden's first legislative victory after a party line vote.
The Senate has never spent $2 trillion in a more haphazard way or through a less rigorous process.
The Senate version revising income limits for this round of stimulus checks, lowering the federal unemployment boost from $400 to $300, and nixing a $15 minimum wage. Still, Republicans insist it's full of pork.
There's $200 million for library services. There's over $300 million for the National Endowment of the Humanities and Arts. There's $20 million for native language studies. These all may be good ideas, but they got nothing to do with COVID.
Some economists say this massive government spending may give the economy a brief shot in the arm, but
the inflation worry is going to be with us for quite some time, but in the near term, that's going to be more rocket fuel for the recovery.
Meanwhile, the nation hitting a new daily record of at least 2 million vaccinations.
Hey, folks, how are you?
Biden starting the week by visiting a veterans medical center administering shots in D.C.
I learned from running the Recovery Act, you got to be hands-on. You got to get down to the detail.
The CDC also issuing new guidance on indoor social gatherings, saying those who are fully vaccinated can gather without masks or social distancing.
We've been through a lot this past year, and with more and more people getting vaccinated each day, we are starting to turn a corner.
Health experts are still warning against states dropping restrictions too soon, though many are already celebrating.
So it kind of gives us a sense of like back to normalcy.
And as for those stimulus checks of up to $1,400 expected by millions of Americans, they could be sent out by the end of the month. John and Jenna.
All right, Tara Mergener, thank you very much. In another very positive development, scientists are hailing the development of a COVID-19 pill as the holy grail of the pandemic. It's called Molnupiravir from drug maker Merck. It was works just like Tamiflu for people with the flu, designed to stop the virus from replicating. The drug's only been tested on about 200 people right now, so more is needed. But if all goes well, it could be available late summer.
On this International Women's Day, President Joe Biden, by executive order, is establishing a gender policy council. It'll focus on women and girls and review changes made to Title IX policies under President Trump. Jennifer Klein, who will help lead the White House Council, suggested federal involvement in local laws like a Mississippi ban on transgender athletes participating in girls' or women's sports teams.
We have the tools that we have, which are federal laws and the bully pulpit and clarity about our policy and values. And we will be working really closely across the White House, as I said, with the Domestic Policy Council in particular and the National Security Council, by the way, on a series of equity issues. So definitely considering that.
Meanwhile, tonight, a big Supreme Court win for religious freedom. Chief Justice John Roberts was the lone voice of dissent in a decision in which 8 justices sided with Justice Clarence Thomas, who wrote the decision. The court siding with a former Georgia college student who sued after his school prevented him from expressing religious views in a free speech zone on his campus. Justice Stephen Breyer hinted at his decision in an earlier hearing.
A college says, "You can't pray here, young student," and imagine that policy is unconstitutional. And suppose he was stopped from praying. What's the damage? Can you say there was no damage? There was.
And here with us now, CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody. David, good to have you with us. Let's start right there. The Supreme Court siding with that former Georgia student. The justices speaking pretty loudly in his favor, 8 of them voting, siding with that student. What does this do for religious freedom in America?
Well, obviously it advances the ball forward, if you will. And, you know, what's shocking about, I say shocking, but maybe it's not too shocking, that Justice John Roberts is the lone dissent. I mean, John Roberts, let's be honest. This is not only analysis about what I'm about to say, but what conservatives truly believe, that he's lost his way, that he is a lone wolf at this point at times, and clearly also a big part of the swing vote on the Supreme Court. But even in this case, he wasn't even close to a swing vote. So conservatives are very, very disappointed in John Roberts, and this just seems to be another case of it.
David, to President Biden in his latest executive order to establish a gender policy council, what might this mean for Title IX?
Well, that's the big question, John. We don't know. We need to sift through the details. It's an executive order. It's not any legislation or a bill or a law. So nothing's going to be codified into law. But look, Title IX, when we start to tinker around with Title IX about sex discrimination, then you get into gender issues. And this gender council, the question then becomes, what role will this gender council have as it relates to Title IX? We don't know, John. I mean, you know, we know about the big issue with female sports, and this idea that transgender men competing against women in female sports has been a problem and a controversy. And so now we wait to see, as it relates to what the Department of Education does specifically when it comes to the Title IX requirements.
Yeah, we'll be watching that very closely, certainly. Well, David, President Biden is about to sign into law that COVID relief bill, $1.9 trillion, the greatest expansion of the welfare state since Lyndon B. Johnson. Washington Post out today with a piece that suggests this pandemic has really made Americans more pro-big government. Do you agree with that? And what direction are we moving in that direction?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, or I think the Washington Post also is absolutely right in the sense that we have shown more of a reliance on the federal government as we move forward through this pandemic, and that should scare the you-know-what out of everybody. I think the concern, especially in conservative Christian circles, is what's more important at this point, God or the federal government? And what I mean by that is that for many folks in this country, God is being replaced by the federal government. We know best. We can help you. We can give you the handout that you need. We can give you the advice. Look at what the CDC did today. We now have the VPs, the vaccinated people, versus the UVPs, the unvaccinated people. I mean, we have enough divisiveness in this country, and now we're starting to. Are people going to actually be listening to the CDC for this guidance? A lot of folks will, and it just makes you wonder kind of where we're going.
All right, CBN Chief Political Analyst David Brody. Thanks, David.
Thanks, David.
Yep.
In other news, jury selection in the high-profile George Floyd murder trial has been postponed for at least a day.
It was set to begin this morning, but legal wrangling over whether former police officer Derek Chauvin should face an additional charge delayed the process in Minneapolis. CBN News national security correspondent Eric Phillips has been following today's proceedings and joins us now with the latest. Eric.
John and Jenna, former police officer Derek Chauvin has already been charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter in the death of George Floyd last May. Well, this morning, prosecutors filed a motion with the appeals court to bring about another charge, a third-degree murder charge. And with that, the judge decided to send home potential jurors for the day, giving the court a chance to weigh in.
I can't breathe.
It is a case that galvanized the world. At the center of it, this video of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin kneeling on George Floyd's neck for nearly 9 minutes during an arrest while Floyd pleaded.
What do you want? I can't breathe. Please, they will kill me, man.
After Floyd's death, protests erupted not only across the country, but around the world. 4 officers were charged in his death, including Derek Chauvin. Fast forward 10 months, and there are still demonstrations. But now, they're outside of the Hennepin County Courthouse where Chauvin will be tried. Fearful of unrest, city leaders put up fencing and barricades around the courthouse, and they've closed some downtown Minneapolis buildings and streets. Also, the National Guard and extra police officers will be in the city. Chauvin faces second-degree and manslaughter charges. Prosecutors hope by reintroducing a third-degree murder charge, it will increase the chances of a conviction. The charge was once a part of this case, but a judge dismissed it. Now prosecutors are appealing to a higher court to bring it back. Seating an impartial jury in this high-profile case will be difficult.
Both the prosecution and the defense in this case are going to be looking for jurors who, no matter what they've seen, read, or heard, can still keep an open mind and listen solely to the evidence that's presented on trial.
The trial will focus on 2 crucial questions. Did Chauvin carry out his duties in a reasonable manner? And did his actions cause Floyd's death?
Prosecutors don't have to prove that they were the only thing that caused Floyd to die, but that having his knee on George Floyd's neck was a substantial causal factor. Defense attorneys are taking issue with this, and they've been pointing to an autopsy report that says Floyd had fentanyl in his system as well as underlying medical conditions.
For alternates is expected to take 3 weeks and more likely happen beginning tomorrow. Now, it's going to take at least 3 weeks, as I say, and opening statements aren't expected until March 29th at least, and the trial will stretch into mid-April at least. John and Jenna, back to you.
All right, CBN's Eric Phillips. Thanks, Eric. Coming up, a look back at the Pope's historic visit to the cradle of Christianity and what it means for peace in the region.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug-of-war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Welcome back. Pope Francis back in Rome after a whirlwind visit to Iraq.
That's right, Jenna. And as CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell reports, the Pope's visit stirred the hopes of Christians who for years have suffered at the hands of the Islamic State.
Pope Francis traveled throughout Iraq from Baghdad in the south to Erbil, Mosul, and Karakosh in the north. To Christians who face the worst persecution at the hands of ISIS, he brought a message of hope.
Ci sono momenti in cui la fede può vacillare.
Certainly there will be moments when faith can waver,
when it seems that God does not see or act. This was true for you in the darkest of days of the war, and it is true too in these days of global health crisis and great insecurity. At times like this, remember that Jesus is by your side. Do not stop dreaming. Do not give up. Do not lose hope.
The Pope came despite the dangers.
We are not scared because Pope Francis was not afraid, and he did not want to let down the Iraqi people.
Many Iraqi Christians lost homes or fled when ISIS swept throughout the land, and since the Iraq War in 2003, the number of Christians has dropped dramatically in Iraq from over 1 million to now about 250,000. It's a hope of many that the Pope's visit will help preserve the church in this troubled land. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
And here now for more, David Curry, CEO of Open Doors. David, let's just begin with your reaction to these remarkable images from the Pope's historic visit to Iraq.
Well, it's encouraging that the Pope is drawing attention to the Christian communities in Iraq. This is a group that has largely been forgotten. The trauma they went through with ISIS and all of the drama of the civil war. The Christians there in that country seem to be caught in the middle of a number of factors. But what the devil tried to destroy, what ISIS tried to destroy, God has sustained. Hopefully, we're going to see that community continue to be restored.
Well, to your point there, the Pope's visit really does amplify the message of Christians in Iraq, namely, and this is what the Pope said, what the Islamic State tried to destroy, God has restored. What are your thoughts when you hear the Pope say that?
Well, it's so easy in this modern world to forget what happened yesterday, let alone 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And the Christian community there has largely been decimated. So I see this as a strengthening of that church. I know these people, it's a good group of people. They love Jesus. They love their community. They're a tremendous influence on the Middle East. This is a historic church. And I think it's important that we stand with them, that we don't forget what happened there. But I think it's a process of restoring, because there's been so many believers who have left that area, forced out by ISIS or from war and from warlords from the north, from the east. There's just been a lot going on there, and I think it's going to be a process to restore.
David, I read in an interview you did with Nations Media, you said Pope Francis was your favorite reformer. You stated because he's breaking religious orthodoxies to make the Catholic Church about Jesus again. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think, and you see this throughout Iraq and in the Middle East, there are institutions which become moribund. They get to be about religion, about sustaining their own hierarchy. And I think the Pope is really challenging the Catholic Church. I'm not a Catholic myself, but to remain about the message of Jesus. And I think it's refreshing. There's all kinds of people on either side of any political debate that you might have. But I think we need to understand that we're not a political movement. We're not even a religious movement. We're about Jesus, the message of Jesus, his life, his death, his resurrection. That story is transformational, what it's done throughout the centuries. And I appreciate that about Pope Francis.
What does this trip, as we look forward, as we move forward, what does this trip portend for other parts of the Middle East and other parts of the world, David?
Well, it's news to us sometimes, but the Islamic community, the Christian community, the Yazidi communities, they've lived side by side here in Iraq, in this Middle East area, peacefully for many, many, many decades. Now we've had these upheavals. There's extremists within Islam, the Islamic community. You have Iran, which wants to take over much of the Nineveh Plain if they could. You have Kurdish independent sources from the north that would love to get a hold of the resources in these Christian communities. And you have a weak central government in Baghdad over the years. So you've got a number of factors which have put this church at risk. What I think is beautiful is that we're not forgetting that we're going to strengthen this church. We're going to stand with them as they stand for Jesus in this community.
All right. Well, David Curry, CEO of Open Doors, we certainly thank you for joining us today on this very important historic story. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, A new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to cbnnewschannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Welcome back. Americans should be proud of the nation's Judeo-Christian heritage. That coming from former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in an interview with CBN News.
Pompeo is speaking out about all issues, including his deep concerns about the Biden administration. David Brody spoke with him recently and has the story.
Mike Pompeo has always been straight-spoken, and in our one-on-one interview, the former Secretary of State didn't disappoint. One of the things on his mind, a new administration that he says doesn't seem to be putting America first.
You know, the big picture challenge is that they just think about America's place in the world so differently than the Trump administration did, right? We had America first at the center of everything we did. This administration seems to have a different set of priorities.
Among his concerns, Joe Biden's views on Iran.
Do you believe this Biden administration is in the appeasement business when it comes to dealing with Iran?
We saw last week that they gave a wink and a nod to what appears to be enormous financial relief to the Iranian regime. We put massive pressure on the regime, and it looks like they're going to allow billions of dollars in wealth to go from South Korea and the IMF into Iran and essentially take a foot off the stranglehold that we had on the Iranian regime. This is not a good start.
Sounds like you're concerned about appeasement for sure.
Yes, I am.
And that concern ties directly to the security of Israel, a situation that concerns him greatly now that the Biden team is in charge.
Are you concerned that they will not be pro-Israel, if you will?
I do worry. Historically, it's been bipartisan. It hasn't been a Republican deal or a Democrat deal. Mm-hmm. This administration was awfully slow on the draw with respect to Israel.
Pompeo clearly doesn't hold back. On China, before he left his post in January, he questioned whether COVID-19 came from a lab in Wuhan. To this day, he still thinks it's very possible.
We don't know for sure, but there's ample evidence and a cover-up that probably is worse than the initial problem set inside the lab that we know, right? We know these Chinese labs that were doing this bio research have had escapes before.
Nowadays, Pompeo is getting his voice out in different ways by joining a couple of think tanks and also on the speaking circuit. At the recent CPAC conference, Pompeo pleased the crowd, even placing in the top 5 of a 2024 presidential straw poll. For now, he's focused on helping the GOP win back Congress in 2022. He has stood side by side with Donald Trump and has a message for those Trump critics.
It is an enormous head scratcher for me when people waver about the legacy of the work that President Trump and our team did for these past 4 years. It's the right direction. When I see Republicans step away and not embrace what it is right for the American people and for our movement, I just don't get it.
As for those Americans who came to peacefully protest the election on January 6th, he stands with them.
Those are folks who just wanted to come express their enormous disappointment with the outcome from the election and the fact that they weren't giving up. They were still in the fight, and I want to be alongside them. I want to be with them in that fight.
He is also taking a stand on faith, especially America's Judeo-Christian history.
What has happened to this country as it relates to from a spiritual standpoint?
I know he's watching over us. This is a very special nation that I have been so privileged to grow up in. Those of us who believe that, those of us who understand the founding and understand the Judeo-Christian traditions of the United States of America have every responsibility to be bold, to speak about this, to be proud of this heritage, and to continue to build on it.
David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5 Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Finally tonight, The Bachelor has a new host. Some of you might know Emmanuel Acho.
Fox Sports analyst and former linebacker will host the After the Final Rose special for the series finale of The Bachelor tonight. After tonight's show, Acho will discuss the finale and the entire season with the program's first African-American bachelor. Acho launched a YouTube series called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, where he answers questions from other influencers. In every platform he's been on, Acho says he lives his life by his middle name, which means God guides me.
That's beautiful. Well, we'll hope that he brings some light.
We wish him
that show and that new role.
That's right. We wish him much success.
Have
That's
a great
going to do
night,
it for tonight's Faith Nation.